People often believe that the past fades quietly, dissolving into memory as years move forward. But the past is patient. It waits. It waits for pride to grow careless, for respect to weaken, for a single, reckless moment to expose everything that was left unresolved. This is one such story. It is not dramatic because of grand villains or sudden tragedy, but because it mirrors a truth many prefer to ignore. Families do not break in one day. They fracture slowly, silently, until one moment finally makes the damage visible to all. The afternoon hung heavy over the Central Valley Ranch. The air was thick, unmoving, as if nature itself sensed the tension that had settled inside the old farmhouse. Inside the kitchen, sunlight filtered through lace curtains, falling softly across a long wooden table. Spread carefully upon it lay a length of white fabric, smooth and untouched, waiting to become a bridal veil. The scent of freshly baked cornbread mixed with the faint smell of starch and cloth. Clara sat hunched at the table, 79 years of life resting on her narrow shoulders. Her back was curved, her hands thin and trembling, but her movements were deliberate. With quiet focus, she guided a needle through the fabric. Each stitch took effort. Each pause was necessary. Her lips moved faintly as she whispered an old saying she had carried her entire life. Haste unravels the heart. She wasn't speaking to anyone in particular. She was reminding herself. As she sewed, memories slipped through her mind like threads. Dresses she had stitched for her daughter when she was small, school uniforms repaired late into the night, costumes, curtains, hems sewn with hope. Sewing had never been just a skill to Clara. It was how she loved, how she endured, how she fixed what life tore apart. Across the table stood Scarlett, her 32-year-old daughter. Her cheeks were flushed with anticipation, her movements sharp and restless. Schedules, guests, appearances, everything had to be perfect. She watched her mother's slow hands with thinly veiled irritation. Each careful stitch felt like an obstacle, each pause an unnecessary delay. Scarlett exhaled loudly and crossed her arms. The silence pressed on her nerves. Finally, impatience snapped. With a sudden movement, she reached out and grabbed the fabric, her voice rising sharply. She accused Clara of ruining the moment, of always interfering, of never letting her make her own decisions. Her words came fast, sharp, careless. The needle slipped from Clara's fingers. The thread snapped. It fell to the floor and tangled on the terracotta tiles like a bad omen no one wanted to acknowledge. Clara froze. Her breath caught in her chest. Slowly, she lifted her gaze to her daughter. Her eyes filled, not with anger, but with pain so deep it hollowed her expression. She tried to answer calmly, her voice gentle despite the sting. She said she was only trying to help, that she was sewing with love, that she always had. Scarlett wasn't listening. She continued, her voice edged with resentment. This wedding was hers, her life. No one, not even her mother, had the right to interfere. Every word struck like a needle driven too deep. From a high-backed chair near the wall, Patricia observed the exchange. Scarlett's future mother-in-law sat perfectly composed, lips painted a sharp red, eyes cold with judgment. A thin smile curved across her face as she finally spoke. She remarked that in her family, things were done properly, elegantly, without improvisation. She looked at Clara the way one looks at something worn and outdated. Clara straightened as much as her frail body allowed. With quiet dignity, she replied that in her family, things were done with love. Patricia scoffed, as though love were a flaw. Near the doorway stood Walter. At 96 years old, he leaned on a wooden cane worn smooth by decades of use. His eyes, clouded but sharp, had witnessed wars, hunger, loss, and survival. He had seen families rise and fall. He had learned that silence, when used correctly, carried more weight than anger ever could. He said nothing. Instead, he lifted his cane and let it tap gently against the floor. The sound echoed through the kitchen, soft, hollow, final. Everyone froze. That single sound settled heavier than any raised voice. It marked a line that had been crossed, whether anyone was ready to admit it or not. As the wedding approached, tension thickened inside the ranch. Clara tried to keep her worries to herself, but rumors drifted in like dust on the wind. Whispers from neighbors, unsettled business, debts tied to Logan, Scarlett's fiancé. Clara's heart ached with fear. She wrestled with herself, knowing that speaking would only anger her daughter, but silence felt like betrayal. The night before the wedding, she gathered her courage. Scarlett stood before a mirror, half-dressed, admiring herself. When her mother entered the room, she sighed impatiently. Clara spoke carefully, her voice trembling but steady. She shared what she had heard. She begged Scarlett to think, to be cautious. Scarlett erupted. She accused her mother of envy, of sabotage, of never wanting her happiness. In her rage, she struck the table, sending the sewing box crashing to the floor. The thimble rolled between them, cold and metallic. Walter stood in the hallway, watching. The wedding day arrived beneath a sky heavy with clouds. The ceremony began with forced smiles and restless hearts. As vows were spoken, thunder rolled in the distance. When the guests exited the church, rain fell suddenly and hard, turning dirt roads into rivers of mud. Chaos followed, laughter, shouting, scrambling. Clara lagged behind, soaked and struggling. She noticed Scarlett's veil caught on a chair, on the verge of tearing. Instinctively, she reached out to fix it. Scarlett turned. Her eyes burned with fury. In front of everyone, she shoved her mother away. Clara fell backward into the mud. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Phones remained raised. Patricia looked away. Logan stood frozen. From the ground, Clara said nothing. Walter stepped forward. He helped his daughter to her feet. Then he looked at Scarlett. "What I have seen," he said calmly, "is not a bride, but a child who does not understand respect." That night, he summoned the family. An envelope was placed on the table. Inside was a document written decades earlier, a condition tied to the house Scarlett believed would be hers. It would remain so only if she honored her mother publicly. The condition had been broken. The house returned to Clara. Pride shattered. Days later, truth arrived in the form of a woman and a child. Logan's past stood at the gate. The warning Clara had tried to give became reality. Then Clara fell ill. Pneumonia took hold. Fever weakened her. Scarlett watched her mother struggle to breathe, and finally broke. Guilt crushed her pride. She apologized through tears. She begged forgiveness. Clara forgave her without hesitation. Forgiveness did what punishment never could. Scarlett cleaned the community hall alone. She bowed before her neighbors. She worked without excuses. Slowly, trust returned. In time, mother and daughter sat together again, sewing. Walter rested peacefully. A child's laughter filled the courtyard. Scarlett learned the hardest lesson of her life. Pride can build a wedding, but only respect can keep a home. And the past, finally acknowledged, loosened its grip.